Thank you for joining us, Hanifa. Hanifa Nayo Washington is the co-founder and director of strategy at Fireside Project, an organization focused on harm reduction. Hanifa Nayo is a social entrepreneur, cultural producer, and healing justice practitioner with 20 years in nonprofit leadership. Hanifa works at the intersection of mindfulness, placemaking, and social justice to create organizations, gatherings, spaces, and experiences rooted in the values of beloved community. As the co-founder and chief of strategy for Fireside Project, Hanifa supports the design, facilitation, and communication of Fireside Project's mission, vision, initiatives, and strategic partnerships. Hanifa is also the co-founder of One Village Healing. She serves as an advisor for American Psychedelic Practitioners Association, Alma Institute, Reconsider, and East Forest's latest project, Journey Space. In 2022, Hanifa was appointed as a founding member of the Global Wellness Institute, PsychedelX, and Healing Initiative. So welcome, Hanifa and Joel.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm not able to turn my video on because of the host, so I'll just hang out until I'm able to turn my video on.
Yes, 1 second. Sorry about that. Adjust that. Thank you so much, seriously, for being able to join us. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you. Let me actually just try. Okay, so I just made you a co-host, so you should be good to go. Great.
Okay,
hello.
fantastic. Good day. Hello.
Good day. Good day to you. Yeah, like I said, thank you for joining. And you know, it's really nice to be able to finally share a space with you. I feel like we've been at the same events, and you know, I do research in New Haven. You know, so I'm all the time out in New Haven, where I know you're at. So it's like it's been a matter of time before we've connected. So it feels good.
We did it. Here we are.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, I actually just made a big move a couple months ago across the country after 20 years of being in New Haven and on the East Coast to Portland, Oregon, actually. So
very cool.
Yes, it's really really amazing things happening in
Portland
and in Oregon, and you know, very important for the work that we're up to really have, you know, being on the ground and being community here, which is so important to me. So yes.
Well, good. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining. And I would love to, like we talked about, just let you take some space, take as long as you need and want to tell us about Fireside, and to tell us about how the first year has sort of gone, and hopefully we can enjoy some conversation about what to expect for the future.
Cool. Fantastic.
Cool.
So I'd love to be able to share some slides, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah, I believe since you're a panelist, you should be able to share.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, so you think after 2 years of doing this, I'd be fluent, but here we go. I'm gonna try my best. Looks like this. Share. Okay. Put that down. How many folks are here with us today?
Looks like we've got about 10 people who are joining us. The participation is unfortunately dwindled a little bit. We had about 50 people join us for the first day, and you know, but this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we will continue to press this and sort of push this information, because it should be a good talk.
Well, that's great. Because where I'm at right now, it's like 8 in the morning, and I guess you all are like 3 in the afternoon or something. I'm not sure.
So I'm in Eastern time zone, and so that's it's like 11 in the morning here. We use the universal UTC, just so that way it's, I guess, a little bit more accessible for everybody.
Okay, that's cool. It's a good practice. Well, good. Well, hello everyone. My name is Hanifa Nayo Washington. I'm really happy to be here, co-founder and the chief of strategy at Fireside Project. And as we kind of just arrive and with this session. And before I get into my slides, I would just welcome you, if it feels good to you, just to drop in a little bit. If you can, if it's good and able to your body, you can scoot your butt to the edge of your chair so your knees are at a 90-degree angle, and just drop the shoulders away from your ears. If it feels safe and good, you can flutter your eyes closed. And just notice your breath. And exhale fully from the lungs, from the mouth. Breathe in through your nose. And exhale like you're blowing out candles. 2 more of those breaths. You can bring your hands to your heart. Roll the shoulders up and back and down. And melt the hands away from the heart back to your laps or to your sides. Slowly flutter the eyes open. And be here now. Thank you for dropping in a little bit. It's all about presence. The gift of presence. And that starts with the individual, with you, getting into a place of presence and awareness. This is really where our practice and our training for our support volunteers starts within mindness, within presence, within centering, within slowing down, arriving. So welcome. I'm really happy to talk to you all about our first year on the Psychedelic Peer Support Line, the Fireside Project, and the role of the Psychedelic Peer Support Line in creating a safer and more equitable psychedelic renaissance. So millions of people every year are experiencing psychedelics, many people for the first time in a non-clinical setting. And we understand that there's very critical, important work that's happened over many, many years in clinical settings to be able to understand on a scientific level, as well as produce results. So some psychedelics can become legalized and decriminalized and used for widespread use. But for the most part, millions of folks are using psychedelics outside of the clinic. We know that psychedelics can cause anxiety and fear and paranoia, feelings of dying, or what is ego death. And when taken without proper support, can feel, risky and maybe moving into places of harmful states of being, feelings that can lead to maybe being called to go to the emergency room or call 911 when those services aren't actually needed. And so, according to a study in 2021, 1% of people who consumed LSD, 1% of people who consumed MDMA, 0.6% of people who consumed psilocybin saw emergency medical care. So this rate increased by 4.2% for those reporting using psychedelics to treat psychiatric conditions without help of a trained guide. So we know that that presence of someone who's there to support, there to listen, to hold space is impactful. So a support line staffed by volunteers trained in the principles of peer support, we know can help minimize those risks and help people fulfill the potential of their psychedelic experiences. And that is what Fireside Project Psychedelic Peer Support Line is answering. So we're answering that call of what does it mean to have 12 hours a day of support that is free and accessible to all people to support folks during their psychedelic experiences and after their psychedelic experiences. So we are here to do that. We are currently open from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 12 hours of support each day. And in our first year have found some pretty amazing things have gone down. But to talk about what our sort of areas of focus are on, providing culturally attuned care, peer support. We're doing peer-reviewed research about what are we finding? What are some of the common themes? So we send a post-call survey after each call, and we have about a 25% response rate to that, and we have some really amazing studies that have come. One full study that's come out already, and we have 3 more on the way in this next year. We'll talk more about that. So we also do public education, and we're doing all of this with a lens of equity, right? And so we know that's important to have that lens both in our internal practices and in our service to the world, because this will make things more equitable in the psychedelic field in the long term. So we connect with people through phone, SMS, text, and through our mobile app. And we support people again in the midst of an experience. Also those who are supporting others who might be in the midst of an experience, and then processing past psychedelic experiences. And when we say past, we really do mean past. It could be from an experience that someone had last night, or like 5 minutes ago, or something that happened, 10, 20, 50 years ago that you're still processing, or it comes up, because we also know that integration and some of the lessons and responses that come out of psychedelic experiences aren't necessarily linear. So it's just not a straight line. It's not on a timeline. And so it's important to have someone to process these things with, because we also know not having integration support after an experiences can actually be harmful, because maybe you don't have anyone to talk to. That could lead to isolation. That could lead to actually like becoming, other, like being dependent on substances, or withdrawing, or feeling unseen, and so disconnecting, which can lead to a whole slew of things. So having support to integrate, to make sense, to talk through, to know that you're having an experience that is normal, so like not out of the ordinary, it's just an important practice. So the support line, we have, when we open up the support line volunteer application process, we have had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people apply for very few slots. So in our first year, we brought on over time about 120 volunteers, and we've had like over 700 people apply. So it's pretty wild, but it's great to know that like so many people are excited about being a part of this. Our volunteers complete a 4-day initial training. They sign up for a year of service, right? And so they do that by doing a 4-hour shift every week, usually the same time every week. And we really see our this year of service as like an entire training. So they will walk away with 300 plus hours of peer support and community time, and really gain this firsthand view, which we really feel we are, like this firsthand view of what is happening in the psychedelic space in real time, outside of the clinic. And then we really also hope to springboard people into the field of psychedelics as well. So a little bit of the data coming out of our first year. We've had, well, at this point today, we've had about 3,500 conversations since launching the line in April of 2021. So we just had a 1-year anniversary on the 14th of April. So you can see here some of the topics that people are calling in about, wanting to either have space held or things they want to know. So out of those 3,000 calls for the first year, so they want to talk about psychedelic experiences that are currently happening in real time, people calling in to process or integrate. So you can see we have slightly more people, who are integrating a past experience. We have people who we, would be like trip sitting someone else, or so supporting a third party, right? So someone who is having an experience and someone supporting them. And seeking information. We get a lot of calls about just people wanting to know about pre-trip support, which we don't do, but we will refer people to our community information page, and there's tons of other organizations and groups that do that type of support. And then we get some calls that are beyond the scope of what we do. Sometimes prank calls or people just, again, wanting pre-trip support is probably the most. And then folks microdosing, and then this percentage of, and growing and at an alarming way, actually, about facilitator abuse, and reporting that, but also calling to work through that. We also just released our impact report. So if you go to our website, www.firesideproject.org, you can download our impact report to also get all of the data to see what happened in the first year. So just a little bit about the duration of our conversations. So we, again, are supporting people through call and text. And we sort of average about 38 minutes on a call and 57 minutes on text. It's interesting supporting people on text because a lot of those are people who are actively tripping. And so a text might come in and then we respond, and it might be like 10 minutes goes by until they respond again. So those are why they're a little bit longer. We also have a kind of a limit on our integration calls for 45 minutes. But when we're with an active tripper, we will stay with them as long as they need our support. So some of our active tripper calls have been like, several hours. So we're really dedicated, and they really come first. So if there's a call that comes in and someone's actively tripping, and one of our volunteers or all of our volunteers are on a line with maybe integration calls, we will pause an integration call to support an active tripper. So you can see some of the substances that folks are calling in that they're using in the moment or have used. More than 50%, of that is folks with psilocybin, and then it really breaks down after that. So LSD comes in next, and then cannabis. We do support folks who are having psychedelic experiences with cannabis, and we do believe that can happen. So that is one of the substances that we support people on. So again, you can see some of the content of the conversations and some of the feelings that are coming up as we're talking to folks. We, on our post-call survey, have a 97% rate of people saying they felt heard, and we also de-escalated them during their time with us. So this was very interesting to see callers who mentioned their PTSD. When we're looking at the clinical work that's going on, a lot of the studies are around PTSD. So it's just interesting to see folks who mentioned that during their call and time with us. This is the number of people who've talked about their depression, when they called in. Again, it's really interesting to see which substance is sort of paired with when people mention these things. So we provide extensive amounts of practices on the line when we're working with our callers. So again, being grounded in that present state is sort of formal and so important to us, foremost. And then we really practice getting out of the way. So we're not guiding people. We don't provide medical advice. We are not medical professionals. We provide peer-to-peer support. So people who've had their own transformational experiences, who are there to listen and to allow. And so we do a lot of reflective listening and reflective questioning, a lot of validation, normalization, reassurance. We provide, again, resources. We'll drop into some mindful activities if that feels necessary or like a good thing to do, and the caller wants to do that. So we do, breath work and things like that. and inviting people to, yeah, you know, to sort of come into a state of being distracted. Sometimes that helps people release people's anxiety, sort of like, what's in the room around you? Tell me about something that you see or that you feel. So just sort of distracting sort of the anxiety mind. And then sometimes doing a little bit of, yeah, guided meditation and things like that. So as I said earlier, we just released and published our first study that has been submitted to be a part of the American Psychiatric panel or paper. So we worked with folks from UCSF, including Dr. Joseph Zamaria and Molly Pleat, and the study was co-authored by Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai, who's amazing. So we are creating a more equitable psychedelic field. And so what does that look like? Like, this isn't just something we write down on the paper, but it looks like launching our equity initiative, which we launched in February, and began recruiting for our first affinity cohort. So starting this month on the 23rd of June, somebody who is a military veteran or are people of color or people who identify as transgender can call the support line to request an affinity peer. So someone who shares that part of their identity to process integration calls. And we know that representation matters and can create feelings of safety and wellness and ease and relatability. And so we just brought on 40 volunteers. They have just completed their training, and we'll begin offering this service on the 23rd. And those volunteers went through the same training all of our volunteers go through, and actually received a little bit of supplemental training depending on the affinity cohort they're part of. There's some things that are important to know and understand when you're working with someone who's a military veteran. And to know and understand when you're working with someone who's transgender or someone who's indigenous or someone who's Black or Latinx or coming from any of the Asiatic groups. So we don't know, we've never done this before, but we're also going to be doing several studies with each group to see the effectiveness and desire and impact of this service. After those volunteers finish their year of service, they will then be offered support to advance themselves in the field of psychedelics, because we also know that there's not a lot of representation when we're talking about the researchers, right? When we're talking about the folks who are the business owners, we're talking about folks who are the facilitators and the trainers and the guides. So we want to give all of our volunteers access to scholarships, to an equity fund that we're raising funds for, to apply for grants, to professional internships and development. And so we've gotten really amazing partnerships and collaborations with several of the larger institutes of training in psychedelics. For example, CIIS has awarded us up to 10 scholarships a year for their training program. MAPS is doing 5 for their MDMA facilitator training program. Naropa was the first group on board, offering 2 to 3 scholarships, full scholarships to their new facilitator training program. And who is it? Dr. Monica Williams, Dr. Robin Carhart Harris, as well as Dr. Christopher are offering paid internships at their facilities, labs, and clinics, which is amazing. And so that list is going to grow, and we really see over time in the long run that this is going to have impact in terms of representation, in terms of people feeling inspired and supported to actually start their careers in the psychedelic field and represent the groups who need this work the most. So some of our testimonials, and I'm almost done. You saved my life, literally. We have people calling in who would have gone to the ER or called the police or thought that they were dying, but maybe we're just going through ego death. So I find that one always really just jumps out at me. I won't read all of these out loud. You can just sort of read them on your own. And so for us, what we're also learning is like what the studies are showing us is that we are having a direct impact on lessening the burden on the emergency support. So for, people calling the police, people going to the ER. And so in time, we hope that the reality of those numbers will help to support the support line staying free forever for everybody and receive some state and federal funds. So we're sort of building that case over the next 5 years to be able to be in a place to ask for support for the line from the government. So and I'll stop sharing this now, but the role of Fireside Project, our vision and a little bit about our name is that we, want to reduce the risk associated with psychedelic experiences. We want to normalize also that people are having psychedelic experiences. And we also want to uplift and understand the role of peer support within the medical model and just within society itself, that we as individuals, as citizens, right, psychedelic citizens, have extreme ability to support and hold each other, right? And we also we see like that this is a beloved psychedelic experience and a beloved psychedelic community, and our name really comes from the feeling that we want people to have, like when you're coming to a fire, like you're coming sitting by the fireside. You just drop into that feeling for a second. You can just it's warm and you feel like you belong, and you feel part of something, and it's like it's in our DNA. We've been sitting around fires. All people have been sitting around fires for millennia, in ceremony, in times of joy, in times of sadness, in times of great emotional release. And so we want to welcome people to the fireside and know that there's always a space for them there.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Such an incredible presentation on the first year. It's really so incredible that you guys have collected such, just such robust data. I mean, this is all so interesting, and it really does speak to the case of like, what does peer support look like? I think a major issue with or a major byproduct of the war on drugs has been, people not only have a misguided view outwardly of these sorts of experiences and these substances at large, but we're just so underprepared on how to take care of one another, and in a post-psychedelic, in a post-drug world, just knowing how to take care of your neighbor who's having a hard time, whether it be a psychedelic experience or whether it be, maybe they've taken too much opioids and they're just sort of really crashing. And it's like, yes, you could call somebody. Yes, you could use Narcan. Or maybe you could just help them, take them somewhere safe. Like, I think these concepts are underdeveloped in a lot of other substances, but I think starting from the home and starting from your communities is it's a noble, and like you're saying, it's something that we've been doing for a long time, just taking care of one another. Yeah. And so outstanding work that you guys are doing. Yeah, so it's something that came up for me. So I think I have a couple questions here, and just we can talk about some guided discussion here, and then we'll open up the floor to a couple questions that I think have come in. But really love the value that being a peer support specialist can offer somebody as something that they can put on their resume. I mean, it's a great experience. What does it seem like, these peer support specialists go on to do after their 1-year commitment, or what is it that they express interest in doing? As far as like,
Yeah, we, in our first year, right, we trained like 120 volunteers, and we've had kind of 2 waves of volunteers come in, and now this 3rd wave with this group of 40 affinity volunteers who, because of what we've learned from the first year, how we're polling them and tracking them will be very different than what we've done in the first year. because the first year was just sort of like getting it started. It was just all an experiment, right? But what we see is that our volunteers come from all different types of backgrounds. And during our training, we really do tell them to leave their credentials at the door. We don't want them bringing in their whatever they're trained in skills. Like we want them to use our peer support skills. But a lot of our volunteers are folks who are interested in, becoming a, psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, are going into nursing, psychiatric nursing. A lot of our volunteers are folks who already have those skills and want to be prepared, especially when the market or the space, the field actually opens and these things are legalized, to be ready to find work in clinics and labs who will be doing these beyond the trials, but actually be providing, providing psychedelic assisted wellness and psychedelic healing. So there's a lot of people who are sort of readying for when all these things become open. There are a lot of people who are just like, I really want to do this because I needed this when I was, whatever, and didn't have this, and it's just a part of giving back. What we're also learning is that what folks are the most excited about, or what they've come to really love about the experience, is the community. And it's surprising us because we thought so many people would say, I really loved my year of service because I got the skills to go on to become, I have 300 hours now, like that I can put down on my resume to say, I'm, more qualified to get into your training program or into this school because I have this. No, people are like, I've gained a community.
Yeah.
I've gained a sense of belonging, and now I have like lifelong connections with people who have similar passions and interests, and that's been really interesting to see.
I think, yeah.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say that's how it goes with like psychedelic. I feel like all of these psychedelic communities, it does just feel so much like a family a lot of times. And I know the same. I could say the same about our IPN community. It really is special. And sorry to cut you off.
We will be, no worries. We will be, for our affinity cohort, really working with them and surveying them as they go through. One, because we need to know what people's actually interests are, because not everybody maybe wants to go to CIS or to Naropa. So we want to know where in the field are you interested in going. Is it more on the ceremonial side? Is it more on the academic side? Where are you interested? And also, once they complete their year and are out doing their advancement work, we will be checking in with them, seeing how's it going. For us, it'll be really important to know how many of them actually do go on to study, to get an internship, and then go on to create either their own things or plug directly into the psychedelic space. That is very important for us to know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that kind of information would be so great to market the experiences to students like our community of students who are hoping to go on to say, I want to be a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. And so we might be able to recommend in that case of, well, if you do this 1 year, this is how often these people who volunteer as a peer support specialist are placed, in competitive internships for your career interests. And on the topic of the affinity cohort, which is a great and such an important concept, what are the current demographics of pardon me, the peer support specialists? How diverse, and if somebody was to say, I would like to speak with a Black woman, I'm a Black woman, I just nobody will get it but somebody who looks like me.
Right. So before the affinity cohort, the numbers were pretty low in terms of who kind of showed up the first year to volunteer. And so we had out of 120 folks, and when we're thinking about people of color in particular, there was about 7 or 8% of our that first year cohort were people of color. And then it just got smaller from there. So we talk about veterans or people who are transgender, even smaller percentages. Now, we just brought on a cohort of 40 people, and with the intention of recruiting from these groups. And so out of the 40 people, there are about 28 or so people of color. And then there's 7 transgender folks and 6 veterans. And of course there's some crossover. And also we know, nobody exists in a monolith of identity, but this is sort of a first start. So the service is going to be offered, it looks like we're starting 3 days a week, but I think we're actually going to be offering it every day, from 3 to 7. So folks will be able to call and be like, yeah, I'd like to speak to an affinity peer. They'll be asked, well, which group? They can say, a veteran or transgender, or if it's a BIPOC volunteer, they can say, okay, I'd like to speak to a Black person or a Black woman. And they'll be able to get that, at least from those out from 3 to 7. There'll be someone represented from each of the affinity groups during that time.
Great. Wow. Well, I want to take just the next. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know, I'm rambling, but I just wanted to just lift, before I get into the questions, in terms of like IPN and involvement, I wanted to share that we apply to become a volunteer. That's one thing that, we'll be looking for. We'll have on the applications coming out for our next round, a checkbox for a lot of our partnerships to see if people are applying coming from those partnerships, and there'll be an IPN checkbox. We need folks, from this demographic for sure to be applying. So to be a volunteer, we're actually going to be opening up, and y'all are the first to know. Like literally on Monday, we'll be dropping the next announcement that the application is open for peer support volunteers. They'll be trained in August and then start on the line in October. So that's coming in. So please apply. We also are going to be launching and doing outward facing trainings. They are virtual currently, but they're called Psychedelic Citizenship. And so it's basically a one-on-one sort of crash course on, gleaning directly from our 4-day training, basically, but sort of the essentials of like, what are psychedelics, how do they work, like what's happening there, how did we get here? So understanding the impact of the war on drugs and how we got here. And then how do you hold space? How do you do, what are some of the essentials of the art of holding space while people are actively tripping or, providing that integration space? How do you interface with emergency services, right? So it's a 2-day training, it's a 1-day training. And we'd love to be able to come to the universities where people are at to, or not come, but to focus, do campus-centric trainings, and then in time be able to train a group of trainers who can then do that on their own. So that's definitely a way that people will be interfacing. And then also in the fall, we'll be kind of revamping our ambassador program. We kind of took a pause as we were regrouping, and that'll basically be, hey, you'll get a training about what Fireside is, what we do, kind of similar to what I just did, and then be geared up with all of our educational materials and stickers, and being able to like pass those out on your campus. So we have some things in the works in terms of how to sign up to do that, but not quite yet. But you can definitely apply to become a volunteer, starting on Monday, and also request for us to do the psychedelic citizenship training at your campus.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say just a couple minutes ago, was this idea of an IPN and Fireside partnership, which you've totally just covered in its entirety, which is so great. And, I think we have been so excited for it because, it just seems so apparent that university leadership, the leadership of, the mental health centers, alongside all of the professional development centers, the university leadership just has a responsibility to prepare and provide students with resources to keep them safe, to allow them to safely explore these things, which happens regardless. It's exactly the same way that a university will have in on the first day orientation, welcome to campus presentations, well, if you drink too much, this is the resource to call. These sort of resources are very needed. And as we move towards more of a, a pro-psychedelic society, I think needed even more so. And to keep university leadership has this responsibility to keep students safe, but also to prepare them, which is what, IPN is really aiming to do for, this emerging discipline of psychedelics. And so I think that just the future for this partnership and the potential that it can have to actually spread meaningful resources to university students, to people who are gearing up for living a long and happy life is, it really is exciting. So I just wanted to express that as well with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the work of IPN is quite far-reaching. It's amazing to see, the mycelium network, like how sprawling it is, and it's just so, it's such important work. When I think about my own, psychedelic experiences and those in the early years, so much of it was in my college days. And I think young people are just in a really different place now. And in terms of like really wanting to be more intentional about things. And I think there's a lot of potential for risk reduction and harm reduction, but I also think there's a lot of potential for healing and wellness and building community, so yeah, I'm excited about this partnership.
Great. Yeah, I do want to just leave a couple minutes for a couple questions. And so I'm going to allow David McMillan to talk. I think he raised his hand first. I'm not sure if we have any Q&A questions, but yeah, so I'll allow him to ask his question. And, I just unmuted you, David. So go ahead, and where are you from? And yeah, go ahead and ask.
Thank you, Joel. David McMillan from the University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine. Hanifa, and this is perfect. My question was on the affinity cohort. Congratulations for getting this launched.
Thank you.
And I have, in expanding, I have a question about where you see this going. So for peer support volunteers, do you currently have a category for physical or mental disability? And if not, do you plan on going in that direction?
Do we have a category for physical or mental disability as an affinity group?
Yeah, so as a peer support, if you will, subcategory. So I work with people that have spinal cord injuries and self-report after self-administration of psychedelics. There's massive spasticity that occurs. And this is something you would not expect from the outside, and that maybe only a peer supporter would have the perspectival knowledge to help it, walk through. So
that's really a beautiful question, and thank you for lifting that. And the answer is yes. So we know that there's so many different affinity groups, particularly who, are marginalized or on the sidelines, that literally like just aren't centered. So when we think about, there's so many groups. So we sort of started with these three as a way to see how will this work, what is the interest, and our goal in time would definitely be to bring on different marginalized or decentered groups, including, we're talking about physical and mental abilities. So the answer in the short term is yes. When is really going to depend on this sort of first year with the affinity cohort. We're doing a whole study to see about its effectiveness and all of that, and then also polling to see like what other groups from the community want to be represented. And so we would hope to bring on at least 2 more groups for the next round of affinity cohort members, sort of in addition to these first 3 groups. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, that is a really great question. I think it's so interesting, leaning into the diverse range of identities. It always comes down to supporting people with just minority identities. So let me, or I think Victor, you can unmute yourself as a panelist. So yeah, let's hear it.
Hi, so it was great to hear you talk. I just wanted to know if you could give a little bit of context, I guess, for how your academic relationships develop to do research. I think that's really interesting that you guys aren't just doing this harm reduction work, which in and of itself is valuable, but that you're also gathering data that can be used to improve what you're doing, and also like inspire other groups and individuals and inform how they approach harm reduction. So how did you convince like universities to engage with this work seriously in an academic way? Are there any weird obstacles and hurdles that you're facing in having to blend this, harm reduction world that isn't really like it doesn't exist for the sake of data gathering, and then blending it in with a world that exists for the sake of data gathering? So how has that been? How did that happen?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And so the founder, so I'm the co-founder, and like the founder, he's definitely like, and he'll say this about himself, he's the psychedelic data research nerd between the two of us. And so he sort of came into the space already kind of with this desire, and also a lot of knowledge around different researchers. And but for us, the idea around collecting data is not it's not even a question of if we're going to do it or not. Like, we actually have to if we're going to seek support from the federal government or from the states in the long term. And so we have to be collecting data, and being able to do that with peer-reviewed research just gives us more. It just gives us more, credit, more credit, if you will. And so there are some universities that are very big in the psychedelic space who are doing psychedelic research. And so approaching them is just a matter of just sending an email, having friends who know somebody, who's a professor. But really, people are kind of falling over themselves actually to be able to partner with us in studies, because it is giving them data and access and insight that is not in the clinical setting. And we're really kind of the only vehicle at this time outside of, if you think about like Zendo project, that's having real-time experiences with people on psychedelics outside of the clinical space. And so the data that we're collecting, which we're collecting anyway, and that is not like it's not traceable, to an individual, but sort of this broad. So after every call, our volunteers they fill out a form basically that says, okay, my call was this long, the person was on this substance and this substance, and it's only what the caller offers. So we don't interview, right? So when the caller calls, we're not like, okay, what's your name? What state are you in? Like, how old are you? Like, what are you on? But if it just during the course of the conversation, some of these things come up, we will grab that data and put it in our database. So we're looking so it's just very interesting, because then we can, when we're running reports, we can do all types of cross-checking. So we can say how many people between the ages of 20 and 35 called in who were Latinx and on psilocybin, and so it's really interesting. So we're kind of sought after a lot too. Some of the hurdles that we have, I would say, are around, really landing with a university who can do the IRB. The IRB process can be a little strenuous. And for example, we're doing a study with the BIPOC group out of the affinity cohort this year. And so we're working with Dr. Monica T. Williams. And so she then has to ask for the IRB process to be submitted through the university that she's associated with. And so sometimes can be a little bit of a stretch for one, the process that the IRB process is. It can be quite lengthy, but also there's just a lot of requirements that they have that make it lengthy. So that's probably the biggest thing. It's just like knowing if we want to do a study, we've got to get the paperwork in like several months before we're expecting for it to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we have one more person who has their hand raised. I want to respect your time, Hanifa.
I was like 2 minutes late, so I'm
okay. Cool. Well, let's let this one last person ask their question, and then we can wrap up.
Cool.
All right, Clifford, where are you calling in from, and what's your question?
I'm calling from Philadelphia, PA. Hi, everybody. Hi, Hanifa. My name is Cliff. So I'll be brief. Now, so I'm hoping on that diversity piece that Joel just mentioned. I'm hoping that has some influence with getting older people in the mix. Because a lot of times the assumption is that, well, if you're over 50 or older than that even, sometimes even younger, you've been doing psychedelics for a while, you've been interested in this thing for a bit, time for you to like step aside. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, I'm 63 now, and I only got interested in this whole thing when I was 60. So, it's not like I've been doing this. It's not like I have a whole psychedelic profile. And I'm also a student, so it's kind of like, a lot of times people don't think about that. They think, well, because I'll go places in the psychedelic community and they'll think, well, where did you work or how long you been doing? I don't have that much of a background. So I'm hoping that, Fireside Project would at least be thinking about the fact that there might be some older people who might need your services, who might, not be as proficient in psychedelica as some people may assume. That's all I've got.
Absolutely. Cliff, thank you so much for lifting that. And, that is definitely a demographic that we have named and listed already. So I think neurodivergent and then, 60 or 55 plus were some of the next groups on our list in terms of when we're recruiting again. Yeah, the answer is absolutely, we're aware of it. And we actually had, we have, in terms of our volunteer pool, we definitely have people in that group already too. So I would definitely, if you're interested also, in becoming a peer support volunteer, to apply during this next round. And I think that something I did mention, and I'm so glad you lifted this because it made me remember, is that not only are the affinity groups supporting people for their integration calls, but they'll also be trained, our affinity volunteers are going to be trained on how to hold integration circles. So folks can come to actual, like a virtual space with like 20 people and be in an integration process. And I think that having that for particularly folks, who are older, to be able to come together, to have that space to talk about what is going on, like what are you experiencing, what are you noticing, as like an affinity group, feels really important, because there is often, either like a generational difference of like how to talk or how to reference things. And so being to think about like that there's a psychedelic peer support group and a integration group for folks 55 and up, it just makes a lot of sense. And when we look at who's downloading our app and what are the ages of people calling in, yes, it is more people who are in the 18 to 35 range. And again, who are the groups who are decentralized? And I think like older people are often fall into that category, who are kind of forgotten, decentralized, not focused on. So I really appreciate you lifting that, Cliff.
Yeah, I'll also just add as well, like, Cliff, I would love to hear more about your experience if you ever want to reach out, as these challenges, or the challenges that you face as a non-traditional student, as an older student in the space. I think that representation would be so valuable, and I would love to help you if that's a challenge that you face, saying people asking, well, what are your experiences in psychedelia, and that's something you're really interested in. Yeah, I think that your voice is one that definitely needs to be heard. So just want to express that as well. Yeah, and so I think that's it for questions. I just want to thank you, Hanifa, so much, and it's been a joy hearing from it's been just a joy being able to connect with you, and I really look forward to everything that we've got in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, Joel. So great to see you here. And everyone, if you go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. So it's you'll see it at the very bottom of the screen. That's the best way to stay up to date with what we're up to and when things are rolling out. Also follow us on all the social medias. Yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you in the field.
Thanks everybody for jumping on it in the morning, bright and early on a Saturday, to come talk with us. It's much love. Appreciate you guys.